From which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Uninvited. Mason Blackwell stared at the text message from his ex-wife, Veronica, his jaw tightening as he read it for the third time. The granite countertop felt cold under his palm as he leaned against it in his modern kitchen. Christmas dinner at my parents' place at 6. Olivia isn't invited. She's too young for this adult gathering. You can come alone. Mason glanced across the open-concept living room where his 17-year-old daughter was decorating their Christmas tree, carefully hanging ornaments she'd made throughout her childhood. At 17, Olivia was hardly a child. She was months away from college, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked part-time at the local animal shelter. The real reason for the exclusion was painfully obvious to Mason. His ex-wife's new husband, Preston Dawson, didn't want any reminders of Veronica's previous marriage at what was now their family celebration. "Everything okay, Dad?" Olivia asked, noticing his expression. Mason smoothed his features. "Just work stuff," he lied, slipping his phone into his pocket. He wouldn't tell her about the text, not yet. At 42, Mason had built an empire from nothing. Starting with a small trucking company inherited from his father, he'd expanded into logistics, warehousing, and eventually real estate development. His success had made him powerful enemies and loyal friends in equal measure. People who knew Mason professionally respected and feared him. Those who crossed him in business learned quickly that he operated by a simple code: loyalty above all else. Betrayal was unforgivable. In his 20 years building his business, he'd crushed competitors who tried to undermine him, fired executives who leaked company secrets, and systematically destroyed the reputations of former partners who violated his trust. His ruthlessness in business was matched only by his devotion to his daughter. When Veronica had left them 3 years ago for Preston Dawson, Mason's former friend and business associate, he'd fought for and won primary custody of Olivia. The divorce had been ugly, with Veronica trying to paint Mason as a cold, calculating workaholic. But the judge had seen through it, especially after evidence emerged of Veronica's year-long affair and her frequent absences from Olivia's life. That night, after Olivia went to bed, Mason poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and stepped onto his balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline. The December air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of impending snow. As he sipped his drink, Mason made his decision. He wouldn't argue with Veronica about Olivia's exclusion. Fighting would only create more tension for their daughter. Instead, he pulled out his phone and typed a simple response: "We won't be attending." Then he made a call to his longtime friend and head of security, Dominic Porter. "Dom, I need you to do some digging. Preston Dawson. I want everything: his finances, his habits, his secrets, especially his dealings with the Winters family." Dominic didn't ask questions. In 15 years working for Mason, he'd learned that his boss never acted without reason. "Consider it done. How deep do you want me to go?" Mason stared at the city lights below, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "All the way. No stone unturned." 3 years he'd kept his peace. 3 years he'd swallowed his rage for Olivia's sake. But excluding his daughter from a family Christmas, that was the final insult. Veronica and Preston had just made a catastrophic mistake. They'd awakened the beast that Mason's business rivals feared. Chapter 2. Ghosts of Betrayal. 2 days later, Mason sat in his downtown office, staring at the file Dominic had delivered. The contents confirmed what he'd suspected. Preston Dawson wasn't nearly as successful as he pretended to be. His investment firm was bleeding money, propped up primarily by his connection to his new father-in-law, Harold Winters, a banking executive with ties to old Seattle money. More interesting were Preston's hidden gambling debts and a string of expensive business trips to Las Vegas that involved neither business nor Veronica. But the real bombshell was buried deeper. Evidence that the affair between Preston and Veronica had begun not 3 years ago, but 5, when Mason and Preston were still partnering on development projects. "Got something else you should see," Dominic said, sliding another folder across the desk. Mason opened it to find photographs of Veronica meeting with his former business partner, Lloyd Reeves, 6 months before the divorce. Lloyd had tried to force Mason out of their partnership around that same time, a move that had failed spectacularly when Mason uncovered Lloyd's attempt and systematically dismantled his financial holdings in retaliation. They were working together, Mason said, connecting the dots. Veronica, Preston, and Lloyd. They wanted control of my company. Dominic nodded. And there's more. That trust fund you set up for Olivia? Veronica tried to access it last year. The bank refused since you're the sole trustee until Olivia turns 21. Cold fury washed over Mason. The betrayal was far deeper than he'd realized. His ex-wife hadn't just cheated. She'd been part of a conspiracy to destroy everything he'd built, including the legacy meant for their daughter. That evening, when Olivia returned from her part-time job, Mason decided it was time for honesty. Your mother texted about Christmas dinner, he said as they prepared dinner together. She invited me, but said you weren't welcome because it's an adults-only event. Olivia's hands stilled on the cutting board. Oh, I declined for both of us. She nodded, then looked up with suspiciously bright eyes. It's because of Preston, isn't it? He never liked me. Preston's opinions don't matter, Mason said firmly. We'll have our own Christmas, with people who actually care about you. Olivia attempted a smile. It's fine, Dad. I'm used to Mom choosing him over me. She hesitated. There's something else you should know. Mom called last week asking if I knew anything about your new development project in Bellevue. She said it was for family financial planning, but it felt weird. Mason kept his expression neutral despite the rage building inside him. Thank you for telling me. Did you share anything? No. I don't know anything about your business deals anyway. She shrugged. Besides, you always taught me that trust has to be earned. Pride momentarily displaced his anger. Despite everything, he'd raised a daughter with integrity and wisdom. We'll have Christmas here, he decided. We'll invite Grandma Rose, Uncle Leo and his family, and anyone else you want. People who deserve to be in your life. Later that night, Mason called Dominic again. I need you to set up surveillance on Harold Winter's banking activities, he instructed. And get me everything on the Bellevue development investors. Someone's been talking, and I need to know who. You think Veronica's father is involved too? Mason's laugh was cold. Harold Winters has been trying to get his hands on my business for a decade. Of course he's involved. The question is how deep. As he hung up, Mason walked to his home office safe and dialed the combination. Inside, beneath legal documents and cash, was a small black notebook, his insurance policy. For years, he documented compromising information about business associates, politicians, and competitors. Not for blackmail, but for protection. He flipped to the section on Harold Winters, reviewing the notes on the banker's earlier ethical lapses, including a buried sexual harassment settlement and some questionable loan approvals. It wasn't enough, not for what Mason now had in mind. His phone chimed with a text from Veronica. Reconsider about Christmas. My parents want to see you. Mason's smile was cold as winter. Of course they did. With Preston's firm failing and the Bellevue development promising massive returns, they wanted to worm their way back into his good graces. He didn't bother responding. Instead, he began making calls to his lawyer, his financial advisor, and several other individuals whose services would be required for what he was planning. By midnight, the framework of his revenge was taking shape. It would be methodical, comprehensive, and utterly devastating. Just like everything else Mason Blackwell undertook. Chapter 3. The Architect of Vengeance. The following morning, Mason arrived at his office before sunrise. His executive assistant, Lydia Nakamura, was already waiting with coffee and the documents he'd requested. The investors list for Bellevue is complete, she said, handing him a folder. And your ex-father-in-law placed 3 calls to your legal department yesterday. Mason nodded. Lydia had been with him for 12 years and was one of the few people he trusted implicitly. She'd rejected multiple poaching attempts from competitors, including one orchestrated by Lloyd Reeves during the attempted coup. I also have the information on that other matter, she continued, placing a second, thinner folder on his desk. It's as you suspected. The Winters family is highly leveraged. Harold's bank is under federal scrutiny for loan irregularities, and most of their personal assets are tied to the bank's performance. And Preston, his investment firm, lost 3 major clients last quarter. They're operating on borrowed time and borrowed money. Mason flipped through the pages, his expression hardening. They're desperate. That's why they're suddenly so interested in reconciliation. There's one more thing. Lydia hesitated. Your daughter's college fund, the separate one in Veronica's name, not the trust fund, it's been emptied. Transferred to an offshore account last month. White-hot rage coursed through Mason's veins. He'd established that fund during the divorce settlement as a gesture of goodwill, with Veronica as trustee. It had contained $250,000 earmarked for Olivia's education. Get Dominic and my attorney here. Now. Within an hour, his office had transformed into a war room. Daniel Fitzgerald, his shark-like corporate attorney, reviewed the financial documents while Dominic reported on his surveillance findings. Preston's made 4 trips to Vegas in the past 2 months, Dominic explained. Lost heavily each time. He's into some bad people for at least $500,000. And the college fund. Daniel looked up from his papers. Technically legal, since Veronica had control. Morally reprehensible, but not criminal unless we can prove intent to defraud. Mason's fist came down hard on his desk. She stole from our daughter. Find me a way to make her pay. There might be something, Daniel said, pulling out another document. The divorce agreement specified that fund was exclusively for educational expenses. If we can prove misappropriation for other purposes, we could file for contempt and financial damages. Do it, Mason ordered. And freeze any remaining funds if possible. As his team dispersed to execute his instructions, Mason turned to the window, looking out at the city he'd helped build. Snow was falling gently, covering Seattle in a deceptive blanket of purity. His phone rang. Veronica. After a moment's consideration, he answered. Mason. Her voice was honey-sweet, a tone he once found irresistible and now recognized as manipulative. I'm hoping we can talk about Christmas. My parents really want to see you, discuss some business opportunities. Interesting timing, he replied coldly. Especially considering you explicitly uninvited our daughter. Don't be difficult, Veronica sighed. Olivia understands these adult gatherings can be boring for teenagers. Besides, this would give us a chance to discuss her future. College is expensive, you know. The audacity nearly took his breath away. She'd drained their daughter's college fund and now was using college expenses as a pretext to get to him. I've made other plans, he said flatly. Mason, please. Preston says the Bellevue development could be a good investment opportunity for my father. Surely we can be civil for one evening. Civil, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Like emptying Olivia's college fund. That kind of civil. The silence on the other end was telling. I don't know what you're talking about, Veronica finally stammered. I think you do. I also think you, Preston, and your father are in financial trouble. And now you want to use me to bail you out. He paused. Tell Harold his loan irregularities are becoming noticeable. The Federal Banking Commission is already asking questions. He ended the call before she could respond, then immediately dialed his banker. Theodore, I need to accelerate some transactions. How quickly can we move on the Bellevue property acquisitions? The East parcels? We're still in negotiations. All of them. Every property in the development zone. I want them secured by the end of the week. Theodore hesitated. That's aggressive. We need to offer well above market value to close that quickly. Do it. And one more thing. I want you to contact every investor in Preston Dawson's firm. Offer them a guaranteed 8% return if they move their funds to our new development corporation. Mason, that's borderline hostile recruitment. It's business. Mason cut him off. And Theodore? Ensure absolute confidentiality. Anyone who leaks information is out. Permanently. That evening, Mason created a new Christmas tradition with Olivia. They ordered takeout from her favorite restaurant and watched holiday movies while discussing her college applications. He didn't mention his discovery about the emptied college fund. She had enough to deal with given her mother's rejection. I've been thinking, Olivia said during a movie break. I don't want to go to Mom's for Christmas Eve either. Is that okay? Mason studied his daughter carefully. Of course it's okay. But may I ask why? Olivia fidgeted with her sleeve. Last time I was there, I overheard Preston and Grandpa Winters talking about using you somehow. They didn't know I was listening, but Preston said something about leveraging Mason's resources while they still could. It felt wrong. Mason's heart swelled with pride, even as his resolve hardened further. You never have to go anywhere you're uncomfortable. And Olivia? Thank you for telling me. After she went to bed, Mason made one final call to an old associate named Victor Hargrove. Victor operated in the shadows of Seattle's business world, specializing in information acquisition through methods best left undiscussed. I need everything on Preston Dawson's gambling debts, Mason instructed. Names, amounts, collection methods. And I want his Vegas contacts. That's dangerous territory, Victor warned. Some of his creditors aren't the negotiating type. I'm counting on that, Mason replied. Find me the most impatient, violent one of the bunch. As snow continued falling outside, Mason Blackwell finalized his blueprint for revenge. By Christmas, the Winters family and Preston Dawson would understand the catastrophic mistake they'd made in betraying him and hurting his daughter. Little did they know, their rejection of Olivia from Christmas dinner was about to trigger an avalanche that would bury them all. Chapter 4. Cards on the Table. 3 days before Christmas, Mason sat across from a man known only as Russo in a private room at an exclusive downtown club. Russo's expensive suit couldn't quite conceal his dangerous aura. He was a businessman who specialized in debt collection for certain Las Vegas enterprises that operated beyond the reach of conventional banking. $500,000, Russo confirmed, sliding a folder across the table. Dawson's been avoiding my calls for weeks. My employers are impatient. Mason examined the IOUs bearing Preston's desperate signature. And if someone were to purchase this debt? Russo's eyebrows rose slightly. Unusual request. These aren't exactly transferable securities. I'm offering to buy the debt at full value, plus 20% for your inconvenience, Mason said calmly, sliding an envelope across the table. Cash. Untraceable. And why would you do that, Mr. Blackwell? Let's just say Preston Dawson and I have unfinished business. Russo leafed through the envelope, counting the $100 bills. My employers don't typically sell debts. They prefer to collect them, with interest and lessons learned. I understand completely, Mason nodded. In fact, I was hoping to retain some of your collection services, just redirected according to my timeline. A slow smile spread across Russo's face as understanding dawned. You don't want to erase his debt. You want to control when and how it's collected. Precisely. That could be arranged. Russo pocketed the envelope. For the right price and assurances. By the time Mason left the meeting, he owned Preston Dawson's gambling debts and had negotiated specific terms for their collection, right after Christmas, when it would cause maximum damage. Later that afternoon, he met with Theodore Alvarez, his banker, who arrived with excellent news. We've secured 90% of the Bellevue properties, Theodore reported. The remaining holdouts will cave when they see their neighbors' deals. And as for Preston's investors, 7 have already committed to moving their funds to your development corporation. That's nearly 60% of his assets under management. Mason nodded in satisfaction. And the special arrangement for the Winters family properties? Theodore slid over another document. The shell company has acquired 3 of the 5 commercial buildings owned by Winters Holdings. They have no idea you're the buyer. The purchases appear to be from separate foreign investment groups. Excellent. And the other matters? The Federal Banking Commission has received our anonymous tip about Harold Winters' loan irregularities. They've scheduled a surprise audit for January 3rd. Mason leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. In just 3 days, he had set in motion a plan that would systematically dismantle the financial foundations of everyone who had betrayed him. Preston would lose his investors and face his gambling debts simultaneously. Harold Winters would face banking regulators and discover his commercial real estate had been acquired by his enemy. And Veronica would watch it all crumble while realizing too late that she'd sided with the wrong men. That evening, his phone chimed with another text from Veronica. Mason, please be reasonable. My parents are hosting important business associates at Christmas dinner. Your presence would be valuable. We can discuss the college fund situation. Mason showed the message to Olivia, who was helping him wrap presents for their own Christmas celebration. She's still trying to get you to come without me? Olivia asked, her voice small despite her attempt at nonchalance. Yes, and apparently, I'm supposed to be the entertainment for her parents' business associates. Mason's tone was light, but his eyes were hard. I've already declined. Twice. Olivia set down the scissors she was using. Dad, can I ask you something? Did Mom really take my college money? Mason hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I discovered it recently. But don't worry, your education is secure. I've established a new trust that no one but you can access when you turn 18. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Why does she hate me so much? Mason pulled his daughter into a hug. She doesn't hate you. She's just selfish. Some people are incapable of loving anyone more than themselves. As he comforted his daughter, Mason's resolve crystallized further. The plans he'd set in motion were no longer just about revenge. They were justice for a child betrayed by her own mother. The next morning, Dominic arrived at Mason's home with urgent news. Preston tried to access confidential information about the Bellevue development, he reported. He contacted 3 of your project managers offering bribes for inside details. Did anyone take the bait? No. Your people are loyal. But there's more. He's desperately calling in favors all over town. Word is, his firm is weeks away from insolvency. Mason smiled coldly. Accelerate the investor exodus. I want his firm empty by Christmas Eve. Dominic nodded. Already happening. But there's something else you should know. Veronica visited her father's bank yesterday and attempted to take out a second mortgage on your old house, the one you let her keep in the divorce. Can she do that legally? Yes, it's solely in her name per the divorce agreement. But she was denied. Seems the bank flagged Harold Winter's loan approvals for special review after that anonymous tip. They're scrutinizing any transaction connected to him. Mason's laugh was without humor. So they're running out of cash already. Perfect. Later that day, Mason received an unexpected call from Harold Winters himself. Mason, the older man's voice was artificially jovial. It's been too long. I hope you'll reconsider joining us for Christmas dinner. Harold, Mason kept his tone neutral. I'm surprised to hear from you directly. Has Veronica enlisted your help in securing my attendance? Well, family should be together at Christmas, Harold blustered. And I was hoping we might discuss some business opportunities. I hear your Bellevue development is generating quite a buzz. Interesting that you mentioned that project specifically, Mason replied. Given that your son-in-law has been attempting to bribe my employees for information about it. The silence was telling. I don't know anything about that, Harold finally said, his joviality evaporating. But speaking frankly, Mason, it would be beneficial for all of us if we could put past differences aside. The banking sector is challenging right now, and strategic partnerships. Let me be clear, Mason interrupted. There will be no partnerships, strategic or otherwise. Your daughter excluded my child from your family Christmas. That tells me everything I need to know about where we stand. Now see here, Harold's voice hardened. That was Veronica's decision, not mine. And frankly, it's a small matter compared to potential business collaborations. Nothing involving my daughter is a small matter. Goodbye, Harold. As Mason ended the call, his assistant Lydia arrived with another update. Sir, the Bellevue Zoning Commission has approved all our permit applications. We can break ground in January. And the adjacent parcels? The ones owned by Winters Holdings. The shell company now controls 4 of the 5 properties. The last will close tomorrow. Mason nodded in satisfaction. Schedule the demolition of those buildings for December 26th. I want Harold Winters to return from Christmas dinner to the news that his commercial real estate holdings are being bulldozed. That's aggressive, Lydia noted, though her tone remained professional. It's necessary, Mason replied. And Lydia, send a Christmas bonus to everyone who refused Preston's bribes. Loyalty should be rewarded. As Lydia departed, Mason turned his attention to his computer, where he reviewed the final pieces of his plan. By Christmas Day, everything would be in place for the complete financial destruction of the Winters family and Preston Dawson. And it had all begun with a simple Christmas dinner exclusion. Chapter 5, Pawns and Players. 2 days before Christmas, Mason received a panicked call from Veronica. What have you done? She demanded without preamble. You'll need to be more specific, Mason replied calmly, signaling to Olivia, who was helping him decorate their Christmas tree, that he needed a moment. He stepped into his study, closing the door. Preston's investors are pulling out. All of them. Someone's poaching them with promises of guaranteed returns on some new development project. Veronica's voice trembled with barely contained fury. I know this is your doing. Sounds like a business problem, Mason replied. Perhaps Preston should focus more on satisfying his clients and less on trying to bribe my employees. Don't play games, Mason. We need those investors. There was a pause. Then her voice turned pleading. Look, I'm sorry about the Christmas dinner misunderstanding. Of course Olivia is welcome. Please, come, both of you. The sudden reversal was exactly what Mason had anticipated. Now that they were feeling financial pressure, Olivia was suddenly welcome at the family gathering. A generous offer, but we've made other plans, Mason said. As for Preston's investors, they're free to place their money wherever they find the best returns. That's capitalism, Veronica. I thought your new husband was a big believer in free markets. You're doing this to punish me, she accused. Not everything is about you, Mason countered. But since we're talking, perhaps you'd like to explain why Olivia's college fund is empty. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. It was a temporary transfer, Veronica finally stammered. Preston had an investment opportunity that would have doubled the money. We were going to put it back with interest. Save the lies for someone who might believe them. Mason's voice turned to ice. You stole from our daughter. That money was for her education, not to cover Preston's gambling debts or your father's banking problems. What are you talking about? What gambling debts? What banking problems? The panic in her voice was genuine. Mason smiled coldly, though she couldn't see it. You might want to have some honest conversations with your husband and father. Goodbye, Veronica. After hanging up, Mason rejoined Olivia in the living room. Everything okay? She asked, carefully hanging an ornament shaped like a small truck, a remembrance of Mason's first business. Just fine, he assured her. Your mother was calling about Christmas dinner again. Olivia's face fell slightly. She still wants you to come without me? Actually, she's changed her mind. We're both invited now. He watched her expression carefully. But I told her we already have plans. Relief washed over Olivia's features. Good. I don't want to go anyway. Mason helped her hang another ornament. You know, regardless of what happens with your mother, I'll always put you first. I know, Dad. She smiled. That's why I want to stay with you. Later that afternoon, Mason met with Victor Hargrove at a secluded table in a waterfront restaurant. I've made contact with Russo's associates in Vegas, Victor reported. They're prepared to move on Dawson the day after Christmas, as requested. They're also eager to reclaim certain items he's been holding as collateral, including a Patek Philippe watch belonging to Harold Winters. Mason raised an eyebrow. Harold put up his watch for his son-in-law's gambling debts? Apparently Preston convinced him it was for a business investment. Harold doesn't know about the gambling. This was an unexpected but welcome development. Make sure the watch is returned to Harold personally, with an explanation of exactly where it's been. Victor nodded. Consider it done. There's something else. Preston has been making inquiries about selling a property quickly. The residence he shares with Veronica. My old house, Mason mused. They're more desperate than I thought. There's more, Victor continued. I've been monitoring Harold Winters as requested. He made a large withdrawal from his personal account yesterday, $200,000 in cashier's checks. He then deposited them into Preston's business account. Mason's eyes narrowed. He's trying to shore up Preston's firm with his own money. Yes, but here's where it gets interesting. The money Harold withdrew? It matches the amount recently deposited into an educational trust for his other grandchildren, Veronica's sister's kids. The implication was clear. Harold had robbed his other grandchildren to help Preston and Veronica. The corruption runs in the family, Mason observed coldly. Send this information to the Banking Commission investigators. And Victor? Find out if Veronica has other accounts we don't know about. I want to track every penny of Olivia's stolen college fund. That evening, as Mason reviewed the final details of his plan, Dominic called with another update. Preston's firm is officially in trouble. They've announced a temporary hold on client withdrawals, claiming it's due to year-end accounting procedures. The financial press is already asking questions. Perfect timing, Mason noted. And our media contacts? Ready to run the story on December 26th, complete with details about his gambling debts and the loan from Harold Winters. It'll hit just as the Banking Commission intensifies their investigation. Mason nodded in satisfaction. Make sure there's a photographer outside the Winters home on Christmas Day. I want images of their happy family gathering to run alongside the story of their financial collapse. The following day, Christmas Eve, brought the final pieces of Mason's plan together. His lawyer confirmed that they'd filed legal action against Veronica for misappropriation of Olivia's college fund, with a court date set for early January. His banker reported that the last of Preston's major investors had pulled their funds. And most satisfyingly, the shell company had completed acquisition of all the Winters family commercial properties. Mason's phone rang constantly throughout the day, calls from Veronica, Preston, and Harold, all increasingly desperate. He ignored them all, instead focusing on creating a perfect Christmas Eve for Olivia. They hosted a small gathering with Mason's mother, Rose, his brother Leo and his family, and a few of Olivia's closest friends. They exchanged gifts, enjoyed a catered dinner, and played board games late into the night. Not once did Mason check his phone or mention business. As their guests departed and Olivia headed to bed, she hugged her father tightly. "This was the best Christmas Eve ever," she whispered. "Thank you for always choosing me." "Always," Mason promised, kissing the top of her head. After she'd gone upstairs, Mason finally checked his messages. There were 7 increasingly frantic voicemails from Veronica, the last one tearful and pleading. "Mason, please. Whatever you're doing, stop. My father says his bank accounts are being audited. Preston's investors are fleeing. We need you to talk to us. Please come tomorrow. Bring Olivia, of course. We can fix this as a family." Mason deleted the messages without responding. Then he made one final call to Russo. "Everything's set for the 26th, he confirmed. "All arranged," Russo assured him. "My associates will visit Mr. Dawson promptly at 9 a.m. They send their thanks for the Christmas bonus you provided for the inconvenience of working the day after a holiday." "Excellent. Remember, I want him scared, not injured. The financial ruin and public humiliation are punishment enough." As Mason ended the call, he gazed out at the snowy Seattle night. Tomorrow was Christmas, the day he would deliver his quiet change to the Winters family gathering. A change that would set in motion the final phase of his revenge. Chapter 6. The Quiet Change. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow as Mason and Olivia exchanged gifts in their pajamas. He'd gotten her a new laptop for college, books from her favorite authors, and a small sapphire pendant that had belonged to his grandmother. "One more thing," Mason said, handing her an envelope. Olivia opened it to find documents for a new trust fund in her name, one with twice the amount that had been in the college fund Veronica had emptied. "Dad, this is too much," she protested, eyes wide. "It's your future," Mason said simply. "And this one is ironclad. Only you can access it when you turn 18, which is in just a few months. No one can touch it. Not me, not your mother, no one." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she hugged him. "Thank you." They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, making breakfast together and watching Christmas movies. Around noon, Mason's phone began ringing again. Veronica, then Harold, then Preston. He continued to ignore the calls. Finally, at 2 p.m., he turned to Olivia. "I need to step out for a couple of hours on some business. Will you be okay here? Your grandmother will be over at 4 for dinner." Olivia looked surprised. "Business on Christmas Day?" Mason smiled. "Just a quick errand. I promise I'll be back in time for dinner." After changing into an impeccable suit, Mason drove his black Range Rover through the snowy streets to the exclusive neighborhood where Harold and Diane Winters lived. He parked a block away, then called Dominic, who was stationed near the house. "Status report?" "They're all there," Dominic confirmed. "Harold, Diane, Veronica, Preston, and about a dozen business associates and their spouses. They've been watching the door all afternoon. Veronica looks like she's about to have a nervous breakdown." "Perfect. And the photographer?" "In position across the street. He'll capture everything." "Good. I'm approaching now." Mason walked calmly toward the large Tudor-style home, where warm lights spilled from the windows and expensive cars lined the circular driveway. Through the large bay window, he could see the gathering inside. Harold holding court in the living room, Veronica anxiously checking her phone, Preston nursing what appeared to be his 3rd or 4th drink. Mason didn't ring the doorbell. Instead, he called Veronica's phone from outside. She answered immediately. "Mason, where are you? Are you coming? Look out your front window," he instructed. When Veronica appeared at the window, her face registered shock at seeing him standing on the sidewalk. She waved frantically, pointing toward the door, clearly expecting him to come in. Instead, Mason remained where he was and held up an envelope so she could see it. "What are you doing?" she asked through the phone. "Come inside. I told you we wouldn't be attending," Mason replied calmly. "But I did want to deliver your Christmas gift personally." By now, others had noticed the commotion. Harold appeared at the window, then Preston. All three stared at Mason standing in the snow, holding the envelope. "What gift?" "Mason, stop playing games and get in here," Veronica demanded. "The gift is in this envelope," Mason explained. "Inside are documents you'll find interesting. First, notice of legal action regarding Olivia's stolen college fund. Second, evidence of Preston's gambling debts, which I now own. Third, information about the shell company that's acquired all of the Winters family commercial properties, properties that will be demolished starting tomorrow morning. The color drained from Veronica's face. Behind her, Harold was pressing against the glass, his expression a mask of confusion and growing alarm. "What are you talking about?" Veronica whispered. "Ask your husband about his Vegas trips. Ask your father about his banking irregularities. Or don't. You'll read all about both in tomorrow's financial papers anyway." Mason placed the envelope in the mailbox, then turned to go. "Wait." Veronica's voice was desperate now. "You can't do this. We're family." Mason paused, looking back at the house where his ex-wife, her lover, and her parents stood watching in horror. "No, Veronica. Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't steal from children. Family doesn't exclude a 17-year-old from Christmas dinner because it's inconvenient." His voice was soft, but carried clearly in the cold air. "You made your choice 3 years ago. Now you get to live with the consequences." As he walked away, he heard the front door burst open behind him, followed by the rapid clicks of a camera shutter. Preston's voice called out, slurring slightly with alcohol and panic. "Blackwell, you can't do this. We need to talk." Mason didn't look back. His quiet change to their Christmas plans had been delivered. Instead of attending their dinner as the financial savior they'd hoped for, he delivered the news of their impending ruin. When he returned home, Olivia was setting the table for dinner with his mother's help. "Everything okay, dear?" Rose asked, noticing his expression. "Everything is perfect," Mason assured her, kissing her cheek. "Just took care of some unfinished business." That night, as they enjoyed their Christmas dinner, Mason's phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "It's done. Photos captured everything. Media alerted for tomorrow's story. Banking Commission expedited their audit to the 27th based on new information." Mason smiled to himself, then turned off his phone. The revenge he'd set in motion would unfold whether he watched it or not. Tonight was for family, his real family. Across town, the winter's Christmas dinner had descended into chaos as Harold, Preston, and Veronica frantically called lawyers, bankers, and business associates, trying to understand the full scope of the disaster that had just been delivered to their doorstep. But it was too late. The quiet change had been made, and tomorrow would bring the avalanche. Chapter 7, Day of Reckoning. Dawn broke over Seattle on December 26th with the distant sound of demolition equipment rumbling to life. Mason sat in his home office, coffee in hand, watching multiple news feeds on his computer monitors. The financial news channel was leading with the story. Dawson investment firm freezes all accounts amid fraud allegations. The screen showed Preston being accosted by reporters outside his office building, his disheveled appearance a stark contrast to his usual polished image. The caption beneath read, "Sources claim firm's collapse linked to principal's gambling debts." On another screen, a local news station was covering the sudden demolition of commercial properties near the Bellevue development site. Surprise holiday demolition shocks business owners. Aerial footage showed yellow bulldozers and wrecking equipment surrounding the buildings that, until yesterday, had been owned by Winters Holdings. The reporter noted that the properties had recently been acquired by foreign investors as part of a larger development plan. Mason's phone rang. "Dominic. Russo's associates made their visit," he reported. Preston tried to run but didn't get far. They cornered him in the parking garage. No violence, as instructed, but they made it clear the debt is due by end of business today. They also took back Harold's watch and a few other items he'd put up as collateral. And the reaction? "Preston's a mess." Called Harold immediately afterward. From what our sources inside the Winters household say, Harold didn't know about the gambling. There was a major blow-up when he realized Preston had used his watch as collateral. Mason nodded in satisfaction. "And the banking commission?" "Arrived at Harold's bank an hour ago. Full audit team. They've already pulled him into a meeting." As Mason ended the call, Olivia appeared in the doorway of his office, still in her pajamas. "Dad, there's something weird on the news about Mom and Preston." Mason quickly switched off the monitors. "Just some business troubles. Nothing for you to worry about." Olivia frowned. The reporter said something about fraud and gambling debts. Mason sighed. He'd hoped to shield her from the uglier aspects of his revenge, but Olivia was too smart not to notice. "Preston's investment firm is having problems," he admitted. "And yes, it appears he has a gambling issue that's contributed to those problems." "Does this have anything to do with you going to Grandpa Harold's house yesterday?" Mason studied his daughter. At 17, She was perceptive and mature beyond her years, a young woman rather than a child. Yes, he admitted. I delivered some information they needed to see. Olivia sat down across from him. Did you cause their problems? Mason chose his words carefully. I accelerated consequences that were already inevitable. Preston's firm was failing because of his own actions. Your grandfather's banking issues are the result of his own ethical lapses. I simply ensured they couldn't continue harming others. Including me, Olivia said quietly. With the college fund. Yes, including you. Olivia was silent for a long moment. Is this why you've been working so much lately? Planning all this? Partly, Mason acknowledged. When I discovered what they'd done, not just to me, but to you, I couldn't let it stand. Are they going to be okay? Mom, I mean. The question caught Mason off guard. Despite everything Veronica had done, Olivia still cared about her mother's welfare. Your mother will survive, he assured her. She may lose some material comforts, but she won't be destitute. I'm not that vindictive. Olivia nodded slowly. Good. I don't want her to suffer. I just want her to see what she did wrong. Mason felt a surge of pride in his daughter's compassion, a quality she certainly hadn't inherited from either of her parents. She'll see, he promised. Now, how about breakfast? We have leftover cinnamon rolls from yesterday. As they ate, Mason's phone buzzed constantly with updates from his various operatives. Preston's firm had officially announced its insolvency. Harold had been temporarily removed from his position pending the audit results. The demolition of the Winters commercial properties was proceeding on schedule, with photos appearing across social media. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Mason opened it to find Veronica standing on his doorstep, her eyes red from crying, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. Is Olivia here? She asked without preamble. She is, Mason confirmed, making no move to invite her inside. I need to see her. Why? So you can ask her to intercede with me on your behalf. Veronica's face crumpled. Everything's falling apart, Mason. Preston's business is gone. My father might face criminal charges. They're tearing down our family's buildings. I just need to talk to my daughter. From behind Mason, Olivia's voice called out. It's okay, Dad. I'll talk to her. Mason stepped aside reluctantly, allowing Veronica to enter. Olivia stood in the hallway, arms crossed protectively across her chest. Can we speak privately? Veronica asked her. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Dad, Olivia replied firmly. Veronica's posture sagged in defeat. Fine. Olivia, I need you to convince your father to stop this vendetta. He's destroying our entire family. Is it true you took my college fund? Olivia asked directly. Veronica flinched. It was a temporary measure. Preston had investment opportunities. So that's a yes. Olivia cut her off. Did you think about what would happen when I needed that money for school? We would have replaced it, Veronica insisted. With interest. You have to understand, we were in a difficult position. No, Mom. You were in a difficult position that you created by marrying a gambling addict and choosing him over me repeatedly. Olivia's voice was steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. You excluded me from Christmas dinner because I was inconvenient. You stole money that was meant for my education. Why should I help you now? Veronica turned desperately to Mason. Please, we can work something out. I'll make sure Olivia gets more time with you. I'll pay back the college fund. Just call off whatever you've set in motion. It's too late, Mason replied calmly. The dominoes are already falling. Preston's firm is finished. Your father's banking career is over. The commercial properties are being demolished as we speak to make way for my development. You planned this, Veronica whispered in realization. All of it. You were just waiting for the right moment. No, Mason corrected her. I was prepared, but I wasn't planning to act. Not until you excluded our daughter from Christmas dinner. That was the final straw. Veronica's eyes widened. All this destruction, because of a dinner invitation? All this destruction because of years of betrayal, culminating in that final insult, Mason corrected. You, Preston, and your father conspired against me for years. You cheated with my friend, tried to steal my company, and then robbed our daughter. The dinner was simply when I decided enough was enough. Veronica turned back to Olivia, desperate. Please, help me convince him. I think you should go, Mom, Olivia said quietly. Dad didn't do this. You did. All of you. With the choices you made. As Veronica left, sobbing openly now, Mason felt a momentary pang of doubt. Had he gone too far? Then he remembered Olivia's tears when she realized her mother had stolen her college fund, and his resolve hardened once more. By evening, the news was reporting that Harold Winters had been officially suspended from his position at the bank, pending criminal investigation. Preston Dawson had been photographed being escorted from his office building by security, carrying a cardboard box of personal items. And most satisfyingly, the demolition of the Winters commercial properties was complete, leaving only rubble where once proud buildings had stood. The quiet change Mason had delivered on Christmas Day had indeed triggered an avalanche. And it wasn't over yet. Chapter 8. Echoes and Aftermath. 3 days after Christmas, Mason sat in his downtown office reviewing the aftermath of his revenge. The financial destruction of the Winters family and Preston Dawson had been swift and comprehensive. Preston's firm was officially bankrupt, with investigators swarming through its records. Harold Winters had been forced to resign from the bank he'd led for 20 years, with criminal charges for loan fraud looking increasingly likely. The demolished commercial properties represented a loss of nearly $30 million to the Winters family holdings. More personally satisfying to Mason was the public humiliation. The financial press had run multiple stories detailing Preston's gambling addiction, Harold's ethical violations, and the connection between them. Photos of the Christmas Day confrontation, Mason standing outside while the panicked family watched from within, had appeared in several publications. Dominic entered with a fresh update. Preston and Veronica are selling their house, your old house. They've listed it for 30% below market value, looking for a quick sale. Mason nodded. And the gambling debts? Russo reports Preston scraped together enough to make a partial payment. He's on a repayment plan now, one that will keep him financially strangled for years. Good. And Veronica filed for divorce this morning, according to our sources, claiming she had no knowledge of Preston's gambling or financial improprieties. Mason laughed without humor. Of course she's abandoning the sinking ship. Some things never change. As Dominic departed, Mason turned to the window, watching snow fall gently on the city below. His revenge had been more comprehensive than even he had anticipated. The Winters family and Preston Dawson were ruined, financially, professionally, and socially. Yet he felt no joy in their destruction, only a cold satisfaction that justice had been served. They had conspired against him, stolen from his daughter, and received the consequences they deserved. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Mason Blackwell, he answered. Mr. Blackwell, this is Diana Winters. Veronica's mother's voice was strained but dignified. I hope I'm not interrupting. Mason was surprised. Of all the Winters family, Diana was the only one who hadn't attempted to contact him since Christmas. Not at all, Mrs. Winters. What can I do for you? I wanted to apologize, she said simply. For my husband's actions, for Veronica's behavior, and for how Olivia has been treated. None of it was right. Mason remained silent, waiting. I also wanted you to know that I never approved of how they treated you or Olivia, she continued. The Christmas dinner exclusion was Harold and Veronica's idea, not mine. I should have spoken up, and I didn't. That's my failure. Why are you telling me this now? Mason asked. Because despite everything that's happened, Olivia is still my granddaughter. I don't want to lose my relationship with her because of others' mistakes. There was a pause. And because it's the right thing to do. Mason considered her words. Diana had never been directly involved in the conspiracies against him, as far as he knew. She had always been kind to Olivia, even after the divorce. I appreciate your honesty, he finally said. And I won't prevent Olivia from seeing you if she chooses to. That's her decision to make. Thank you. Diana's relief was palpable. That's more than I deserve, given what my family has done to you. After the call ended, Mason sat in contemplation. Diana's apology had been unexpected, a reminder that even in families driven by greed and deception, decent individuals could exist. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Blackwell, Veronica is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insistent. Mason sighed. Send her in. Moments later, Veronica entered his office. She looked exhausted, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a simple sweater, her usually perfect makeup minimal. Thank you for seeing me, she said, taking a seat across from him without being invited. What do you want, Veronica? Mason asked bluntly. I've filed for divorce from Preston, she stated. I want you to know that I had no idea about the extent of his gambling or his conspiracy with my father. Mason raised an eyebrow. Are you expecting sympathy? Or perhaps assistance? Neither, she replied, meeting his gaze directly. I'm here because I need to understand something. All of this destruction, Preston's firm, my father's career, our financial ruin, was it really just because we excluded Olivia from Christmas dinner? That was the catalyst, Mason acknowledged. But the punishment fits the broader crime. You, Preston, and your father conspired against me for years. You stole from our daughter. The dinner exclusion was simply the final insult that made me decide to act. Veronica's shoulders slumped. So thorough, she murmured. So complete. You didn't just hurt us, you obliterated us. Just like you tried to do to me 5 years ago, Mason reminded her. The difference is, I succeeded where you failed. What happens now? She asked. Now you rebuild your life, if you can. Without Preston, without your father's influence, without my money. And Olivia? That's up to her. She's nearly 18, old enough to decide whether she wants a relationship with someone who stole her college fund and excluded her from family gatherings. Veronica stood to leave, then paused at the door. You know, Mason, I always knew you were ruthless in business. I just never thought you'd apply that same ruthlessness to family. Mason's smile was cold. You stopped being family the moment you betrayed me and our daughter. Everything after that was just business. After she left, Mason returned to the window, watching as Veronica exited the building far below, a small figure against the snowy backdrop of Seattle. His phone rang again, Olivia this time. Hey, Dad. Grandma Diana just called me. She wants to have lunch sometime. Is that okay with you? Mason thought about Diana's apology. If you want to see her, that's your choice. I won't stand in the way. Thanks. She seemed really sorry about everything. Olivia paused. Mom called too. She's moving into an apartment and wanted to know if I'd help her unpack this weekend. Mason tensed. What did you tell her? I said I'd think about it. Olivia's voice was thoughtful. Dad, I know what Mom did was terrible. The college fund, excluding me from Christmas, all of it. But she's still my mother. Mason closed his eyes, reminding himself that Olivia's capacity for forgiveness was what made her better than both her parents. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, he said finally. Just be careful. Your mother has a pattern of putting herself first. I know. I'm not forgetting what she did. But maybe I don't have to punish her forever, you know? As they ended the call, Mason reflected on his daughter's words. Olivia was choosing a path of conditional forgiveness, not forgetting the betrayal, but not letting it consume her either. It was a wisdom Mason himself had never mastered. In his world, betrayal demanded consequences, and those consequences were absolute and permanent. He would never forgive Veronica, Preston, or Harold for what they'd done. Their destruction was merely justice served. That evening, Mason reviewed the final reports on his revenge plan. Preston's remaining gambling debts had been structured to ensure years of financial pressure without possibility of bankruptcy relief. Harold's legal troubles were mounting, with the banking commission finding more irregularities daily. The Bellevue development was proceeding on schedule, with the demolished Winters properties now cleared for construction. The quiet change he delivered on Christmas Day had rippled outward, destroying everything it touched, just as he'd intended. Chapter 9. The Price of Vengeance. 6 months after Christmas, Mason stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching a summer sunset paint the Seattle skyline in hues of gold and crimson. Behind him, the sounds of celebration filtered through the open doors. Olivia's high school graduation party was in full swing. The months since his Christmas revenge had brought significant changes. The Bellevue development was well underway, already being hailed as the most ambitious project in the city's recent history. Preston Dawson had left Seattle in disgrace, moving to Phoenix where he'd found work as a mid-level sales representative at an insurance company, a dramatic fall for the once prominent investment manager. Harold Winters had avoided prison through a plea deal, but was banned from the banking industry for life. The Winters family fortune was gone, with Harold and Diana downsizing to a modest condominium in a retirement community. Veronica had perhaps fared the best of them all. After divorcing Preston, she'd found work as an event coordinator at a downtown hotel, a job that utilized her social skills but provided none of the luxury she'd become accustomed to. She and Olivia had cautiously rebuilt a relationship, meeting for occasional lunches and phone calls. Mason had watched this reconciliation with reservation but respected his daughter's choice. Olivia would be leaving for Stanford in the fall, having been accepted with a full academic scholarship, her future secured despite her mother's theft of her college fund. There you are. Olivia's voice interrupted his thoughts as she joined him on the balcony. Resplendent in a blue summer dress, she carried her graduation cap in one hand. Hiding from your own party. Mason smiled. Just getting some air. It's your party, not mine. Still, you threw it. She leaned against the railing beside him. Thank you. For everything. You earned it all yourself, he assured her. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset. Dad, can I ask you something? Olivia finally said. Something serious? Of course. Are you happy with how everything turned out? Mason considered the question carefully. I'm happy you're thriving. Proud of your accomplishments. Grateful that your future is secure. That's not what I meant, Olivia pressed. The revenge against Mom, Preston, Grandpa Harold, did it make you happy? Mason turned to face his daughter fully. It wasn't about happiness. It was about justice. They betrayed us, stole from you. They deserved consequences. I know what they did was wrong, Olivia acknowledged. But watching what happened to them these past months, it's been hard. Especially Grandma Diana. She never did anything to hurt us. Diana was collateral damage, Mason admitted. I never targeted her specifically, but you didn't protect her either, Olivia pointed out gently. And now they've lost everything. Their home, their money, their reputations. They made their choices, Mason said firmly. Every consequence flows from their own actions. Olivia was quiet for a moment. You know, Mom asked me if she could come today? To my graduation party. Mason tensed. What did you tell her? I said no. Olivia's eyes met his. Because I knew it would make you uncomfortable. But part of me wanted her here. She's still my mother, despite everything. The admission struck Mason unexpectedly. Despite his complete victory over his enemies, he'd inadvertently forced his daughter to choose between her parents. You could have invited her, he said, surprising himself. I wouldn't have objected. Olivia shook her head. No, you wouldn't have said anything. But you would have been angry, even if you hid it. And today was too important to risk tension. Mason recognized the truth in her words. Even now, 6 months after his revenge, the thought of Veronica in his home filled him with cold fury. The thing is, Dad, Olivia continued, watching you these past months, how focused you were on destroying them, how much energy you put into it. I've been wondering if revenge is really worth the price. What price? Mason asked. The part of yourself you have to shut down to pursue it. The constant anger. The inability to move forward. She touched his arm gently. You won, Dad. Completely. But you don't seem any happier than before. Her insight struck uncomfortably close to home. Despite his complete victory, Mason had found no joy in it. Only a cold satisfaction that justice had been served, followed by an emptiness he hadn't anticipated. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, he said finally. I'm not talking about forgiveness, Olivia clarified. I'm talking about letting go. For your sake, not theirs. Before Mason could respond, Dominic appeared at the balcony door. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that requires your attention. Mason nodded to his daughter. We'll continue this later. In his home office, Dominic delivered the latest report. Veronica's requested a meeting with your lawyer. She's making a claim on some personal items from your old house. Family heirlooms, she says, were wrongfully retained when you sold the property. Mason's jaw tightened. Deny it. Everything in that house was part of the sale. There's more, Dominic continued. Preston's back in town. Word is, he's trying to rebuild his reputation, telling people your vendetta against him was unjustified. He's meeting with potential investors tomorrow at the Fairmont. The familiar cold fury rose in Mason's chest. Find out who these investors are. Make sure they know the truth about his gambling, his fraud, everything. Dominic nodded and departed, leaving Mason alone with his thoughts. And Olivia's words echoing in his mind. You won, Dad. Completely. But you don't seem any happier than before. Was she right? Had his pursuit of revenge become a prison of its own? He destroyed his enemies, but the anger still burned within him. Undiminished, unsatisfied, demanding more. The sound of laughter from the party filtered into his office. Olivia and her friends celebrating their achievement and future possibilities. Their joy stood in stark contrast to the cold calculation that had consumed him these past months. Mason returned to the party, watching as Olivia moved among her friends, radiant with happiness and potential. In the fall, she'd leave for Stanford, embarking on her own life journey. And what would he be doing? Still pursuing vengeance against enemies already defeated? As the party wound down and guests departed, Olivia found him again. "I'm heading out with some friends for a late dinner," she said. "Is that okay?" "Of course." Mason hugged her. "It's your night. Enjoy it." After she left, Mason found himself alone in the penthouse, surrounded by the remnants of celebration. He poured himself a bourbon and returned to the balcony, where night had fallen over Seattle. His phone rang. Dominic again. "Preston's investor meeting tomorrow has been expanded. Harold Winters will be there too, apparently trying to rebuild some connections." "Who else?" Mason asked. "Several people from your network. They're testing the waters, seeing if your opposition to Preston and Harold remains as strong as before." Mason should have felt anger at this defiance. Instead, he felt a strange weariness. How long would this cycle continue? How many times would he need to destroy these people to be satisfied? "Sir," Dominic prompted when Mason remained silent. "What do you want me to do?" In that moment, Mason thought of Olivia, her wisdom, her capacity for conditional forgiveness without forgetting the lessons of betrayal. He thought of the resources he'd expended on revenge that could have been directed toward building something new instead. "Nothing," Mason said finally. "Do nothing." "Sir," Dominic sounded confused. "Let them have their meeting. Let them try to rebuild. It doesn't matter anymore. With all due respect, if they start regaining influence." "They won't," Mason interrupted. "They're broken, Dominic. Whatever they build now will be a shadow of what they had. My revenge is complete. It's time to focus on the future, not the past." After ending the call, Mason stared out at the city lights. His enemies were defeated. His daughter was thriving. His business was more successful than ever. Perhaps Olivia was right. Perhaps the true price of vengeance wasn't paid by its targets, but by the one who pursued it, in the form of an anger that could never be fully satisfied, a past that could never be truly left behind. Mason Blackwell would never forgive those who had betrayed him. That wasn't in his nature. He would never welcome Preston or Harold back into his circle, never trust Veronica again. The consequences of their betrayal would follow them for the rest of their lives. But perhaps, for his own sake and for Olivia's, it was time to redirect his formidable focus and energy toward building rather than destroying. To let the cold satisfaction of vengeance fulfilled give way to the warmer prospect of new achievements. As Mason finished his bourbon, he made his decision. The quiet change he'd delivered at Christmas had triggered an avalanche that had buried his enemies completely. There was nothing left to destroy. It was time to build something new from the ruins. When Olivia returned later that night, she found her father in his office, not plotting further revenge, but reviewing plans for a new development project, a medical research center to be built on the site of the former Winters properties. "Still working?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Just reviewing some plans," he replied. "How was dinner?" "Good." She studied him curiously. "You seem different." Mason considered her observation. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About letting go." Hope flickered in her eyes. "And you were right." The admission came easier than he expected. The revenge is complete. It's time to focus on building something new. Olivia crossed the room and hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you, Dad." As he returned her embrace, Mason knew he would never be a man who forgave betrayal. That fundamental aspect of his character remained unchanged. Preston, Harold, and Veronica would never be welcomed back into his life or trust. But perhaps he could be a man who, having exacted his revenge completely, knew when to turn the page. Not for his enemy's sake, but for his own. And for the daughter who had somehow emerged from the crucible of her parents' conflict with wisdom beyond her years. The quiet change that had triggered an avalanche of destruction at Christmas had served its purpose. Now it was time for a different kind of change, one focused on the future rather than the past. For Mason Blackwell, that would have to be enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.